1. In 1991, I was 6 years old, and my family, mom, dad, and sister, had moved to a different part of town. Better schools, nicer area, that kind of thing. It was certainly an upgrade from where we were moving from. The house stood out from the other houses in the neighborhood. It was the only two-story house in the neighborhood, and the foundation noticeably sat up higher than the surrounding houses. My dad had learned that when the neighborhood was being developed, and the land was being leveled and flattened, they wound up with a mound of excess dirt, so they basically just built a house on top of it. It was a tri-level house with a 2-car garage, family room, half-bath, and closet on the lowest level. After living there comfortably for 10 or so years, my parents decided to combine the half-bath and closet into a full bathroom. To do this, we had to jackhammer through the concrete foundation to add and move plumbing for the new shower that was going in. Keep in mind that context is speculative, given that there's no way to know if doing so had anything to do with what started happening almost immediately after we remodeled that bathroom. It's just always felt that way to me and my family. The middle portion of the house was the kitchen, dining room, and living space with 3 bathrooms and a bathroom at the top level. Within days of the remodel, late at night, my dad's stereo system starts turning on in the living room while everyone is asleep. I was the first to wake up, so I went downstairs expecting to find my dad rocking out at like 2 a.m. for some reason, although he's definitely never done that before. Though he was and is quite the audiophile, so you never know. But as I'm getting down the stairs, not only am I realizing it's some random late-night radio playing, but there aren't even any lights on. I just remember turning on a lamp and going over to the stereo cabinet, turning off the receiver and standing there like, what the hell? I was the only one who woke up as far as I knew. I had a feeling my sister, 14 at this time, was pulling a prank, but when I accused her of doing it that next morning, she was not having it. Parents brushed it off, considering they never heard anything either. Well, this would keep happening. I'd say probably 8 to 10 more times in the following couple of months. The same thing would happen every time, always in the middle of the night. Stereo would come on and the volume would slowly go up until someone ran downstairs and turned it off. There were times it had gotten way too loud before someone made it downstairs, and this particularly frustrated the hell out of my dad, because this stereo system was his pride and joy, and he was afraid the speakers were going to get damaged. My parents, of course, thought either my sister or I were doing this, but before we had even fully convinced them it wasn't us, other things started happening. For example, I was standing in the upstairs shower washing my hair one time, and as I'm facing the back of the shower wall, I see a shadow sweep around the whole shower. Of course, I pulled the curtain open, expecting to see my sister or someone messing with me. But no one was there, and the door was locked. There were a lot of shadow incidents. From the living room you can see upstairs to some degree, and we would often see out of the corner of our eyes. We would see something quickly crossing the hallway from one room to another, like you would just barely catch a flash of something when no one was up there. Touch lamps would come on by themselves often. My dad said on multiple occasions he'd be laying awake, having trouble sleeping, and the touch lamp on the nightstand next to him would come on by itself. Most notably, my close friend and my dad described seeing the exact same person in the house. In fact, they both saw the person while they were doing the same thing, which was walking into the front door when no one else was home. Probably a year or so into these occurrences, my dad got home from work one day, opened the front door and saw a young girl around my sister's age, standing at the top of the stairs that would take you down into where the remodeled bathroom is. He said she looked about my sister's age and had similar blonde hair, wearing a light blue dress and a white collar. As soon as he saw her, she bolted down the stairs. He went over there, checked the whole downstairs, upstairs. No one was home. A friend of mine not long after that would do the exact thing. We got home from school. I threw him my keys to open the door because I was carrying stuff. He walked in the front door and saw the same thing my dad saw. Described the same hair, clothes, everything. I wish the story got juicier from here, but ultimately we just adapted to it. It was a little spooky at first, but once we realized it was just a young girl, we were so used to it anyway, it was almost comical. Things kept happening up until the point I moved out at 19, and the house was sold about a year later when my parents would divorce. One other interesting detail is that the guy who bought the house did so as an investment property. that he planned to rent out. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that house being sold or going up for rent over the 20 years since. Did we release the ghost of a young girl after breaking through the foundation? Perhaps a grave was among the mound of dirt that the house was built on. Did something nefarious happen, or was it just an annoying glitch in the Matrix? Regardless, it's always been fun to speculate. 2. This story is mostly about my mother, who decided to share it with me one day, but first, I'll start with a small anecdote of mine that I believe could be connected to the story. When I was between 5 and 8 years old, I lived with my mother in my great-grandmother's old house. At the time, I had many stuffed animals, toys, and makeup kits for kids. Every time I came home from school, I would find my toys scattered everywhere, and many of them would go missing. The most striking thing that happened to me was when my mom asked me to go tell my uncle, who lived further back on the property, that we were leaving with him in the morning in his car. At the time, I was unpacking one of my disorganized makeup kits. After informing my uncle, I returned to find the kit completely organized. I went to my mom and asked her if she had done it. She looked confused, and I noticed a certain seriousness to her face. Then suddenly she smiled and said, "Yes, sweetie, it was me. I just wanted to play a little prank on you." I didn't give it much thought after that. At the time, I used to go to sleep with her in a big bed. One night while we were sleeping, my mom got up and saw my great-grandmother putting a dish in the kitchen. My mom asked her if she had organized the makeup kit. My great-grandmother, confused, said she hadn't and had been resting. Something that caught my attention was when she said, "They've probably come back. They're back." My mom returned and I pretended to be asleep. The next day, she took me to my grandmother's house to stay for a week. When I came back, everything was normal, and eventually I forgot about it. Since then, many strange things have happened to me, but I didn't pay much attention to them. Here's my mom's story. Not long ago, she asked me if I remembered what happened with the makeup kit, and I said yes. She told me that when she was 6 years old, she lived in that same house with her grandmother, my great-grandmother, and slept in the same room where we used to sleep. Her grandmother had her own room. She said she used to hear small footsteps inside her room every night. Things would move around, clothes would disappear, and objects would go missing. One night she felt something climb onto the bed, like a cat had jumped on it. She got scared and hid under the covers. Suddenly, something spoke to her from the darkness. It introduced itself with a very tiny voice and asked her not to turn on the light. From that night on, everything changed. They visited her every night, talking to her. She would ask them who they were and what they wanted. These things simply said they were her friends and had come to visit her because they liked her. As the nights went on, she started to have doubts and became afraid. These voices would tell her to go with them, that they would take her to beautiful places full of colors and toys. Over time, they got closer and even began to touch her. She described their hands as very tiny, like a newborn baby's hands. One night, one of them pulled her hair playfully, and that's when she started to get really worried. They kept insisting she crawl under the bed. The fear grew so much that she asked her grandmother if she could sleep in her room, telling her that the duendes, goblins, wanted to take her away. My great-grandmother, who was very religious but didn't believe in fantasy, agreed to sleep with her in her room. While they slept, these things returned and woke my mother up. She could feel them pulling on her clothes, trying to drag her under the bed. She finally awoke her grandmother. Before waking up, her grandmother suddenly stood up, turned on the light, and they both heard things scurrying around the room. Crying, my mother explained everything she had heard all those nights. Her grandmother told her not to worry and admitted that she had heard them too. She carried my mother to her own room and locked my mother's bedroom with a padlock. The next morning, very early, they called people from the church to come and inspect the house. They didn't doubt my great-grandmother, as she was considered a wise and truthful woman. When they moved the bed, there was a hole in the floor, about the size of my mother and very deep, as she described it. They sealed it with cement and placed wooden planks over it. When my mom told me this story, I asked my great-grandmother about it while she was still alive. She confirmed my mother's story and shared what she had heard as well. From then on, every time I visited that house, it gave me an eerie feeling. My mom said she was afraid these things might have come back for me. Since they sealed the hole, they never bothered her again. But I still can't explain what happened with my makeup set and all the stuffed animals I lost. 3. For full disclosure, I would consider myself an open-minded skeptic. These things happened after I suddenly lost my dad, who I was pretty close to illness as a kid. Plus, there was a lot of dysfunction in my family after his death. So I'm not sure if these were just the imagination of a child who was grieving her father while living in a dysfunctional household or what. I still feel really spooked when I think about them and have trouble explaining some of the stuff. The first weird thing I noticed was a shadow I saw on the living room couch. The couch was in a really well-lit area next to a big window, so it was a weird place for a shadow. I don't even know if shadow would be the right word here. It was like every time I walked past the living room, out of the corner of my eye, I'd see a black shadow-like silhouette of a woman sitting on the couch. I could name specific details, like it always looked like she was sitting with her legs curled up on the couch beside her, and her hair pulled up into some sort of bun. Of course, when I turned to look, there would be nothing there. But this kept up for years. I did start to think I was maybe unwell or just imagining things. Until other people, like my brother's girlfriend, who I had never told about this shadow woman, started complaining to me that they kept thinking they saw a woman on the couch out of the corner of their eye. But when they turned to look, nothing was there. The next weird thing was how it kept happening that I would wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of people talking downstairs, sometimes yelling even. And I always had a really weird, unsettled feeling when this happened. I was always scared to open my door when this happened because it just felt so off. But in the times I was brave enough to open my door and check, there would be nothing. Just dark downstairs, no one there, and everyone else in the house asleep in their rooms. I started sleeping with my TV on for years to try to drown out the sounds. Again, I thought I was maybe imagining things, maybe I was unwell, or developing some disorder. Until other people in the house started complaining about hearing it too. Sometimes my TV would just turn off on its own while I was sleeping, and I'd still wake up to the talking downstairs. Back when family computer rooms were still a thing, I'd obviously stay on the family computer until pretty late at night, as a lot of young teens would do, checking MySpace or whatever. Except the family computer room was right next to the basement, and when I stay up at night in the computer room, I'd hear footsteps going up and down the basement stairs. I also got a weird feeling about it, and was sometimes afraid to open the door, but I sometimes did at my mom's insistence, that maybe one of the cats or dogs had gotten left down in the basement. Of course, it was always dark with nothing down there, the few times I felt brave enough to check. When I was an older teen, I had a laptop, and I started having issues that even when the laptop was fully turned off, every morning at around 3 to 3:15 a.m., it would turn on and start playing random songs or random YouTube videos. Maybe there was a technical explanation for this, like a virus or an alarm or something. It would always do it around 3 a.m., and it was random on if it would open my music player or YouTube. And it was usually the last song or video I had watched or listened to, even though my laptop was turned off and closed. Maybe with all the other stuff going on, I was just projecting something paranormal onto a glitchy laptop. One of my weirdest memories was one day, I was sitting on my bed working on a paper for school. I remember I had my TV on, and I remember Scrubs was on. I'm no Superman. I'm really dating all of this, aren't I? When I got that weird feeling that you get when someone is watching you from my doorway. I looked in the doorway, and I just saw a face and nothing else. No body, and the face already looked a little transparent. It was weird, it was like an orangey color, and the eyes were really big and black, kind of reminded me a bit of an owl. After a few seconds of staring back at it, it just sort of disintegrated into thin air. I just got up and slammed my door shut, and freaked out about it for a bit. A few years ago, my mom sold the house. I went to visit for the last time, as a grown woman in my early 30s with my husband, and weirdly enough, part of me almost wanted something weird to happen while I was visiting. Nothing weird or paranormal did happen, though. My mom claims she got rid of whatever was there. Maybe she did. Or maybe we were all just sick with grief and family dysfunction when I was a teen. It was all still weird, though, and I still don't know what to make of it. 4. Alright. It's been enough years now that I feel ready to share this story. Now, from an outside perspective, this story is not super scary and at most is odd. Having lived it, I was terrified of this place and still am to this day. So here goes. Some background. At the time of this event, I was 20 and a firefighter for the US Army. Everyone is shook when I say that, but army bases are basically walled cities, and like any other city, they require firefighters. My best friend was in my unit with me, and for the sake of this retelling, we will call him Jay. Jay and I were on a 48-hour on, 72-hour off schedule, and being two young idiots with more free time than safe, we developed some dumb hobbies, the biggest of which was urban exploration. This had nothing to do with the supernatural, as neither of us had any belief in anything supernatural, and simply enjoyed the exploration. It felt like being a sort of archaeologist, except one of more recent history. The place we were stationed in the US was full of abandoned buildings, or even entire towns within a few hours' drive. For well over a year, we broke into and explored literally hundreds of abandoned structures, with absolutely no supernatural happenings. And it grew to be all we could think about. We spent all of our free time exploring, or trawling the forums looking for new places to see. It was on one of these forums that I came across a post about a town, and I mean a tiny town, that had an abandoned colonial-style mansion. I will not say the name of the town here. I showed Jay this post, and we decided this mansion would be our next exploration. We drove 2 hours from our duty station to this little town, and found a town that consisted of 3 streets, 1 gas station, 1 county tornado shelter, and that's about it. I'm talking super tiny town in the middle of the woods in the southeast United States. We went into the gas station and asked the clerk about the mansion, but she claimed to never hear of it. I should point out at this point that the entire town just gave off a bad vibe. As a former skeptic, I realize how dumb that sounds, but I really felt, I don't know, threatened? Oppressed? Something like that, by the entire place, for no real reason. The couple of people we spoke to were nice enough, and the place, while perhaps a bit southern, poor Methville-ish, was far from the worst area we had entered in search of an abandoned place to explore. The only thing I noticed odd about the town was, for as small as it was, there were like 5 churches in the town. Not super abnormal for the Bible Belt, but none of the churches bore classic Christian iconography, like crosses or some such. They also had slightly odd names like Church of the Light, and other slightly obscure non-denominational names. Again, not that weird. The first of the weirdness started after we checked into the hotel we had booked about 15 miles away in the nearest decent-sized city, and came back after dark. Any veteran urban explorer knows you go after dark and not use bright lights till you're inside the building, unless you want the locals calling the cops on you. Jay and I drove all around the town for over an hour, which is impressive considering it was woods, a few fields, and 3 streets looking for the mansion. We never found it. We finally parked in the only large parking lot there, the tornado shelter. While we had a smoke and bemoaned the fact that we had wasted time on a false lead, we noticed a group of 5 people walking down the side of the road in our direction. Again, not that odd. It got real odd when these 5 entered the circle of light created by one of the only 5 streetlights in the town, all in the parking lot of this county tornado shelter, and didn't become any clearer to see. That doesn't sound scary, but picture this. It's around midnight, give or take an hour, and someone is walking up to a lit area. While they approach, they are sort of hard to make out because you are looking at them from an illuminated area into the dark. They would be hard to see, night vision being what it is, and disrupted by the light you are standing in. Nothing odd about that. But when these 5 walked into the light I was parked under, all 5 did not become illuminated. Again, it doesn't sound scary in the telling, but seeing 5 human-shaped dark patches standing directly under a streetlight, where anyone, even someone with a dark complexion and black clothing, would have had at least some detail, was terrifying. I don't mean this was a dark person in dark clothing standing in the light. I mean this was somehow 5 person-shaped patches of pure black, standing in a well-lit area not 10 to 15 feet from us. The light had literally no effect on them. At that point, Jay and I said screw this, and got the hell out of town. That was odd and would have been scary enough, but the second and final supernatural effect of my visit there were the dreams. I would like to again remind you I never saw the mansion with my own eyes. Jay and I, however, spent nearly a year having the same nightmare about the mansion, that again I shouldn't be able to say was there. The dream starts with me walking down a path in the forest for a few seconds, before I enter a clearing and I see an old but well-kept 3-story white wood Victorian-style house, with a white wood wrap-around deck and large wood columns. I walk up the dirt path, to 3 wood steps up onto the porch, and then up to the green-painted double doors. I feel sick to my stomach in this place, and feel something wants me to come inside very bad. But at the same time, I am 100% certain that I should not enter the house. I open the right double door, and all I can see inside the house is pitch black. I wake up. That dream doesn't sound scary from an outsider's view, and I get it will be super anticlimactic to anyone listening to this, but that's because I'm recounting a real thing I lived through and not a dope fictional story. I had that exact same nightmare, and felt the exact same pull to a place I very much should not enter for almost exactly a year after I went to that godforsaken town. It was scary enough on its own for me, but it wasn't until a slightly drunken conversation with Jay a couple of years later, after I went to visit him, as our army duties had taken us to different places in the world, that he would mention something about the dreams. I asked him what he meant, and he would describe the exact same nightmare for almost the exact same amount of time as I had experienced. And that, dear listener, is it. That's my super anticlimactic story about the one and only genuine supernatural experience I had nearly 10 years ago. I still have the dreams once in a while, but whatever it is in that town, I am 100% certain that there is a mansion there, and something lives in it. Those events took place over 10 years ago, and I have a different life now. Out of the army now, and I'm far too old and far too busy with family matters to do urban exploration anymore. I think that thing wanted me to find the mansion, and kept trying to get me to come back, but who knows? All I do know is I will never go back to that podunk little town. And no, I will not tell anyone in the comments what the name of the place is, or even what state. Believe me or don't, but I will have no part in sending someone else into that place, because something very wrong lives there. 5. I've always believed my parents' house was haunted. Let me give some backstory. The house I grew up in, I knew was haunted. I was born and raised in that house, and from ages 4 to 6, I saw some things I still don't believe. Unfortunately, my parents never saw or heard them too. That's not what this story is about, though. We moved into a new house the year I turned 6. My parents hoped that nothing would haunt it. But I always had this weird feeling. This one room, we called it the Orange Room, due to the bright orange carpet it had when we moved in, was sort of an in-between room. It sat directly in the middle of the house and acted as a sort of secondary living room. This room connected the main living room, the kitchen and bedrooms together, so you had to walk through it to go anywhere in the house. I hated it. Something about that room felt off. The first few years we lived there, nothing really happened. My consistent and repetitive nightmares from my old house, another story for later, had stopped. I thought that maybe nothing would be wrong with this place until one night. The new house sat on old train tracks. The tracks were pulled up and turned into a road, but the old wood was still used in some of the construction of the new housing. I didn't know this. I was about 9 at the time when I started to hear it, the train whistle. I was sitting in the orange living room playing with Legos. I looked outside of the large bay windows and saw nothing, no one. We no longer have any trains running anywhere within a 50-mile radius of the house. I would ask my mom about it, and she'd say I probably just heard a truck horn. The thing is, I was obsessed with trains at the time, and I knew the difference between a train's whistle and a truck's horn. This was definitely a train. I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to my imagination until one day when my neighbor mentioned that she had wood from the old train tracks in her house. I got chills and knew that what I was hearing was really a train whistle. I knew I wasn't crazy. Things seemingly got worse after that. My mom tried to hide it, but I knew she was scared too. One night something she couldn't explain happened, and I didn't know if I could believe her. I was 12 at the time and knew about the small weird things my mom heard and saw, like the shadow of a cat sprinting behind a chair, or some pictures being knocked over on a table, or a Christmas bell ringing when she was home alone. She kept chalking it up to minor things. The window was open, the air was on, it was a breeze, etc. One night, though, she couldn't explain it. The clock in the main living room was heavy and hung on the wall above our fireplace. Beneath the clock was the mantel, where my mom kept all the picture frames with pictures of myself, my sister, and my cousins. It was fall, so there were added Halloween decorations as well. I don't remember exactly how late it was, but we were all fast asleep. My mom heard a loud crashing sound come from the living room, and she freaked out. She woke my dad up and urged him to go look, but he was exhausted. She dragged him out of bed and they both made their way to the living room. What they saw, neither of them could explain. The clock had fallen off of the fireplace. It should have fallen straight down right into the mantel, correct? Nope. It didn't even touch the mantel. The mantel was in pristine condition, nothing had been moved. The clock, however, was about 10 feet from the fireplace, in the middle of the living room, face down. My dad and her tried to recreate it the next morning, but the fireplace was brick. Nothing that they did, not even a breeze or a draft or the AC, could have caused it to go that far. A few more years went by before the next incident. It was winter and I was about 16. I would play games late into the night on weekends, and it was about 2:30 a.m. when I was finally turning everything off to go to bed. Every time I would shut stuff off, I would look out the large bay window by the orange room just to make sure that the outside lights had been turned off. That night when I looked outside, I noticed that the lights had been turned off, but that something was staring back at me. I freak out and sprint to my parents' room, waking them both up. I told them that I saw what looked like a man with an extremely long face staring at me through the window. My dad grabbed a metal bar and went out into the living room. Nothing, no person, no footprints, no tracks in the snow. I know what I saw. It was definitely a face. That's when the nightmares started to return, the exact same ones from when I was a kid. Other weird occurrences happened, like a tan figure standing in the background of one of my Snapchat pics, the background of which was the orange room, or a distorted selfie where my eyes were blacked out, also standing in that room. I moved out soon after and escaped the nightmares and the weird experiences once more. I would visit from time to time, but nothing else seemed to happen. That is until 2 weeks ago. We were decorating for Christmas, and I was happily moving ornaments from one tree to another when I heard it, the strange, familiar sound of my mother's Charlie Brown snow globe playing music. I whipped my head around, stopping dead in my tracks, and watched as the snow globe suddenly started playing. I couldn't breathe. My mom entered the orange room and saw me standing there pale as a ghost, she said. Then she asked if I had turned the dial of the snow globe. I told her no, and straightened my posture. I told her I was passing through, and showed her the ornaments I was holding, and explained that I couldn't have turned the dial, it's on the bottom of the snow globe, and would require the use of both my hands to turn it. And it's old and hard to spin. I asked when she put that snow globe on the shelf, wondering if it was leftover movement in the mechanism from when she put it out. She told me she put it there 5 hours prior, when I had just woken up. It couldn't have been residual movement. I don't want to go back into that room. I feel so weird when I do. Christmas is coming up. I know I'll have to. But I really don't want to. It sucks, but I'm dreading what will happen the next time I go back. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 405. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Let's see, this will go up on the 20th. It will be the last paranormal story before Christmas. Not the last one for the year though. I have one more to go after that, hopefully. If you did enjoy the video, then please do hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And do support me on Patreon, which is linked in the description, as should be the second channel, which is operating under my own name of John Wilkie. Okay, we've no other business today, so let's move on to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is... We'll keep it spooky this week, as it is a paranormal video. Ghost, werewolf, or vampire, which one would you want to be if you had to pick one? Or, oh, what the hell, let's throw in a fourth option. You could also be a zombie if you really, really wanted to. But zombies are icky. They fall apart. I would choose to be a vampire, but one of the cool ones, that get to live forever and be very rich, but can still snack on human food even though it won't keep them alive. I've given this a lot of thought over the years. Let me know what you think in a comment below. But I say live forever, but an eternity of this... Well, there's always sunlight. Anyway, let me know what you think in a comment below. And with that, let's move on to the answer of the day from a previous video. And today's answer comes from Paranormal Stories 302, and we're going back a bit for that one. And the question was about holiday traditions and foods and things like that are perfectly normal for you and your family, but seem a bit odd to other people. Let's see. Today's answer comes from Christina's SOS. I think that's right. I do apologize if I'm getting that wrong. Our family tradition is from another country. My father would make ebelskivers for every holiday. They are round, hollow Danish pancakes. Very, very good. You can find the recipe and info online. Thank you so much for your answer, Christina. Okay. With that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.